Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Buckeyes. We've got Patrick Murphy on the line from Bucknuts, 247's platform for Ohio State athletics. Want to remind you that you can help us build the channel by grabbing the Amazon link in the description section below. Also, we've got 2 exclusive live streams each and every week, one in which I respond to your YouTube comments. We've got 40,000 year to date, so thank you for all the comments. The other exclusive live stream, I bring you on to talk college football with me. How does it get much better than that? Patrick, we appreciate you stopping by. Your first time here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. So let's look at the 2020 recruiting class, which a couple recent commits just in the last few days have come in from inside the state and outside the state in New Jersey. Your thoughts about the Ryan Day approach, what you've seen thus far? I know that the 2019 class took a bit of a hit in regards to what people are looking at, and that's the broad picture ranking, but the individual star ranking was still exceptional, top 3 in the country.
Yeah, that 2019 class, I think, was always going to be ranked a little lower than maybe Ohio State's standard in recent years, just because of sheer numbers, kind of what you touched on there. Even if Urban Meyer had remained the head coach and things had rolled as normal, they just weren't going to be able to bring in as many guys. And that is reflective in the recruiting rankings. But as you said, if you go by an average rating per recruit, they were one of the best in the country. And so it's a smaller class, but a very talented class. There are at least a couple guys, I think, that could make an impact as freshmen this year. Garrett Wilson, the receiver out of Austin, Texas, is a guy who it would be very surprising if he's not in the rotation. He enrolled early in the spring, was a big part of their spring practice. If you watched Ohio State's spring game, he caught a nice touchdown in the back corner of the end zone. So he's a guy that I think, while they have plenty of talent at wide receiver right now, can crack that rotation at one of the spots. Another big name that I think people are excited about and could get in a rotation as well is defensive end Zach Harrison from right here in Columbus. He's a kid that's 5 stars, was recruited by nearly everybody, and kept his recruiting very close to the vest. Was not on social media and whatnot like many recruits these days are. And it kind of came down to the end, and Ohio State was able to make sure he didn't leave the city. They are very deep at defensive end, the Buckeyes are this year. So Zach Harrison will, if he gets time, it'll probably be in spot duty, situational things and stuff like that, I imagine. But yeah, that 2019 class is small but talented, and I think as we go on through the next few years, you'll see those other guys start to emerge.
Patrick, if we step back again to this 2019 class, you mentioned Harrison and you talk about Wilson, and those guys are the headliners. They're top 20 players, not at their positions overall, coming out of the high school ranks. So they're elite talents. Anybody else maybe a little bit more under the radar that you would expect? Maybe it's based on what you've heard and seen that you're really impressed with, that they could break through and become not superstars in the Big Ten, but impact guys that are going to have meaningful roles, and maybe also just because of the sheer need at that position.
Well, one guy, and I think you can almost include him in the Zach Harrison and Garrett Wilson conversation, but offensive line is not always as sexy of a position. But Harry Miller, another 5-star kid, he was the country's number 2 center. He's a guy who, I don't think he'll play right away just because they have guys that they like at center, but it wouldn't surprise me to see him on the depth chart this year. A lot of offensive linemen redshirt. I think they may hold on to him in case they decide to, they want to get him out there, get him some experience. He's a very, very talented kid, a really good kid too. Does a lot of, service work, missionary type stuff, building houses and things like that. So he's one that I think, while, he may not grab highlights or anything like Zach Harrison or Garrett Wilson will in the coming years, could be a very good piece to the building of an offensive line. But some kind of under the radar guys, Noah Potter, another defensive end. He's the younger brother of Micah Potter, who played for the Buckeye basketball team and is now transferred to Wisconsin from Mentor, Ohio. He's a guy that I've seen a little bit of. I like what I've seen. Still very raw, But when you get to work with Larry Johnson and you have talent and natural ability, and I think he does, he's a guy who I think can develop. Plus, he took the number 97. And if you followed the Ohio State program the last 7 or so years, that's been a number with the Bosa brothers that's become very recognizable for Buckeye fans. So took that on right away and kind of put a little bit of pressure on himself. And then, we go back to talking about receivers. Jamison Williams, a 4-star kid out of St. Louis, the country's number 13 receiver. And in a normal Ohio State class, I think that Jamison Williams would be getting a lot of hype. But when you land a kid like Garrett Wilson, he kind of steals the headlines. Jamison Wilson has, size, speed, what you want out of a receiver. I think he's a guy who does need some time to polish things a little bit at the college level. But I believe he'll be, assuming his development goes as expected, he'll be a piece for the Buckeyes in the future. Cade Stover, a linebacker out of Mansfield, a kid that's just a hard worker from everything I understand, grew up doing farming stuff and whatnot. So, he's one of those early to get into the building, early to work, that type of stuff kid. Linebacker is a position that Ohio State hasn't been great at the last couple of years. And I don't think Cade Stover is a guy who contributes this year at outside linebacker, but in the future, I think he's a kid who Buckeye fans will get to know pretty well.